Hey Optimancers, Chris here. So somehow on this channel I have never shown how to make a Hexadin, which is a multiclass of Hexblade and Paladin. It's usually mainly Paladin, but you might go more than one level of Hexblade, and I'll cover the various options in this video. My intention here is to discuss the various options you have for optimization. First, let's talk about how to arrange your multiclassing. So I figure there's three optimal ways you can go. The first is to make a ranged Hexadin. So if you do that, what you're going to do is first you're going to take your 2 levels in Hexblade Warlock, and then you pick up Eldritch Blast, and Repelling Blast, and Agonizing Blast, and then that becomes your primary attack. Afterwards, you can just go straight Paladin. I would probably go with the Watcher subclass, and you can combine, some reasonably effective attack with some control with Repelling Blast, and you're getting the two big draws of Watcher's Paladin, the Aura of Protection, and the Initiative bonus aura at level 7 of Paladin, or level 9 overall. Now with this build, you aren't smiting, or you're not using extra attack, but even without these things, you can do perfectly reasonable damage with Eldritch Blasting and occasional Hexblade Curse boosting. This is also the build where the Warlock Patron doesn't matter so much, so if you want to go with another type of Warlock, this works just fine. Second option is to make a Hexadin where your Dexterity is your secondary ability score. So what you do is you're going to take your first level Warlock, get Hex Warrior right away, and then you switch to Paladin at level 2. Because you don't get heavy armor proficiency when you build this way, you'll want to have a 14 Dexterity to get the best armor class and a better initiative. This does not give the best armor class a Hexadin can have, but the 14 Dexterity gives you that initiative boost. When you get your first ability score increase, you take the Polar Master Feat and then you use a Spear with Shield. After that, you want to get your Charisma up to 20. This is going to result in a pretty decent melee character, and you'll get to smite and use melee paladin spells. You do have the option here to get the second Hexblade level to give you a decent ranged option, but that will put all your paladin goodies another level behind. So there's a significant cost involved. The third option, and the one I'll be using for this build, is actually to take Paladin with your first level. This is going to give our character heavy armor proficiency. This eventually means we'll have plate armor, giving us the best possible armor class. Now, unless you're okay with a 10-foot movement speed penalty for wearing heavy armor where you don't meet the strength requirement, that means we will want a 15 strength score, which is going to mean a lower dexterity score. With the higher strength, we'll also not be too bad at level 1 since we can still have an okay attack ability score. But at level 2, we dip Hexblade to get Hex Warrior, and then we go back to Paladin until at least level 7. Like with the last option, we'll want Polar Master and combine that with Spear and Shield. So I'm showing you the build here on D&D Beyond. If you click the link in the video description, you can find the final build available for you to check out. Now, let's discuss our racial options. And custom lineage just kind of rules the roost here. We're going to be heavily focusing on Charisma, so the single +2 ability score bonus works out okay, and then we can get Polar Master right at level 1. This is a big offensive boost at these lower levels. We get two benefits with Polar Master. The first is when we make the attack action with our spear, we can use a bonus action to make a melee attack with the opposite end of the weapon. That bonus action attack is something we're going to use all the time, and it significantly increases our damage, especially at low levels, but the benefit is actually fairly significant even at higher levels. Now the base weapon attack is just a D4, but as we increase in Paladin levels, you're going to see there's more and more ways that we add to damage. So that base weapon damage means less and less. The second thing is that while we're wielding our spear, other creatures provoke opportunity attacks from us when they enter our reach that we have with our weapon. I find this comes up reasonably often. And basically, Polar Master, pre-level 6, it's almost doubling our offensive capability. In fact, with the extra opportunity attacks, it's probably more than double. And once we get our Paladin aura, we can already have our Charisma bonus to +4 in addition to that. So I'm not really worried about taking a half feat here to boost Charisma. I do not think that is the optimal option. I think the optimal option is to worry about our Charisma when we get our first ability score increase through our class. Now for size, you can go medium or small, and both work fine. I've selected medium sized here. Now, a lot of races have some really nice racial features, and you might just want to play something besides custom lineage. and pretty much any race, which can get a bonus to Charisma, works okay. Just be prepared to wait until level 5 before you get Polar Master, and that's something you're really going to feel at levels 1 through 4. And also, once you get your Aura of Protection, basically your Charisma bonus is going to be +1 behind until you get it up to 20. So you're going to feel the difference for quite a few levels, but it still works fine. It's still a decent character if that's what you want to play. I'm here to tell you what's optimal. I think what's optimal is the custom lineage. So the ability scores are pretty much set. With the point buy, you can start with a 15 strength, which we need to meet the strength requirements of the best heavy armors, 10 dexterity, which means we probably want to go Watcher's Paladin for that eventual initiative boost, 14 constitution, and 17 charisma. Now you could get away with a 16 charisma, but what that means is that at level 5 you're going to need to focus entirely on charisma instead of having the option of a half feat, which I think is better than any other use of those 2 points from point buy being used elsewhere. Our first level goes into Paladin. This gives us better starting hit points than if we went Hexblade first, gives us our heavy armor proficiency, and a couple class features. Divine Sense is pretty circumstantial, allows you to detect celestials, fiends, or undead within 60 feet that aren't behind full cover. We have 4 uses per long rest right now, which honestly is more than you'll likely ever need. Secondly, we get Lay on Hands, which allows us to use our action to heal wounds. Right now we can heal up to 5 hit points, or substitute 5 hit points of healing to remove a disease or neutralize a poison. At low levels, this is really useful for if someone goes down to 0 hit points. We can expend a single hit point from our pool, get them back up. However, the scaling here is really good. 5 more points for every paladin level, so that can be pretty significant healing at higher levels. I mean, think about it this way. When we reach 8 level in paladin, or level 9 overall, we could heal 40 hit points with a single action. Consider a cleric at level 9, upcasting Cure Wounds to 5th level, the maximum level they could cast. That would be 5d8 plus their wisdom modifier. Let's say that's another +5. That's about 28 points, compared to the 40 we could heal. Even when that cleric gets the heal spell, Lay on Hands can restore at least comparable amounts. This feature alone makes the Paladin one of the better healers in the game. I am recommending Athletics and Persuasion as starting skills. Listen, I mean, with a 15 strength, our athletics won't be bad. So, in a pinch, we could grapple, at least decently. This is not a grapple build by any means, but as a backup option, it could work in a pinch. And Persuasion, probably the most used charisma-based skill in the game. Choose any background you like, really doesn't matter. I've done the stereotypical noble background with History and Perception as added proficiencies. Paladin gives us a pretty strong set of starting equipment. Chainmail and Shield gives us a starting armor class of 18, and that is solid. We get a martial weapon, and honestly, pick whatever you like. It's going to be a backup weapon. I mean, maybe somebody else in your party needs a martial weapon, but we're using a spear, which is a simple weapon, so we'll pick that up as our simple weapon. And that is going to be our primary weapon. So let's just do a quick check of our damage per round. So at level 1, we're using strength score for weapon attack, so it's just a d6 plus 2 damage, plus a bonus action attack for a d4 plus 2 damage. Whenever an opponent moves within our reach, we can take an opportunity attack. I'm estimating maybe once per combat. So with a +4 to hit, that's 55% chance to hit for 5.5, 55% chance for 4.5, that's the bonus action attack, and then critical damage on the primary attack, so that's 5% of 3.5, and then 5% of 2.5 for our bonus action attack, and then with 1 opportunity attack per combat, that's 3.21, and I'm assuming about 4 rounds per combat. So we add all those together, we get 6.62, and the baseline I use, which is kind of what I consider to be a reasonably effective damage for each level, would be 5.68. That's based on like if a warlock was maximizing charisma, taking an agonizing blast and using hex. So yeah, at that level they'd be 5.68. So we're 17% over that baseline. Not bad at all. Okay, so at level 2, we're going to go into warlock for our dip. And to be a Hexadin, you need to take the Hexblade subclass, and this gives us 3 things that we want. The first is we can use Hex Warrior to use our Charisma modifier instead of our Strength modifier on our spear attacks. This gives us a nice offensive boost. Second is, we can use Hexblade's Curse once per short rest. As a bonus action, you pick a target within 30 feet, and then you get your proficiency bonus as a damage boost against that target on every attack. We expand our critical range to 19 to 20, and we recover a couple hit points when the target dies. It's 4 hit points right now, it'll eventually be 6. Now, Hexblade Curse is difficult to add to DPR because although I make estimates as to the number of combats, the number of rounds in a combat, the number of short rests, the number of long rests, with Hexblade Curse, that's not enough. You also have to estimate the number of opponents and how long each opponent will be alive. It's very, very difficult. But what I would do, I haven't included it in any of my DPR calculations, is I would assume a couple points of DPR maybe. But it is really hard to estimate. It is guesswork beyond the guesswork I normally do. One thing I'll note about Hexblade Curse that works really nicely with Paladin is the expanded critical range. Because once we get Smite, which is next level, we also damage our Smite damage on a hit against a target affected with Hexblade Curse. This means a single hit can end up doing a massive amount of damage if we expand the spell slot resource. And as we go up in levels, there will be other dice that we add to our attack damage, and all that is going to get doubled as well. The third thing Hexblade gives us is a superior first level spell selection. And the spell choices are pretty easy. So we're going to start with Eldritch Blast. Without Agonizing Blast, it's just cantrip damage, but we don't have a lot of ranged options, so at least this gives us something we could do at range. Green Flame Blade is going to be valuable to us for exactly 5 levels. Once we get extra attack, that's probably our better option most of the time. But before then, whenever we attack a creature next to another creature, we can do our Charisma bonus and damage to the second creature. You can take Booming Blade if you prefer, but we're not really the kind of build that encourages that movement required to trigger the damage, so I actually think Green Flame Blade is the better option. Armor of Agathis provides 5 temporary hit points per spell slot level, and a creature that hits you with a melee attack takes an equivalent amount of cold damage. This continues until all the temporary hit points are lost. Armor of Agathis also has pretty good duration, it doesn't use concentration, and it is a good candidate for upcasting when we get higher level spell slots. And the shield spell. So this is the third big advantage of going Hexblade. Paladins do not get the shield spell, but a plus 5 armor class boost on top of heavy armor and shield. That's amazing. Now, we have to talk about this. Here's where how things are run at your table really matter. Because technically speaking, you can't cast shield if your hands are full unless you have the Warcaster feat. A lot of DMs hand wave somatic components, so check with them. Otherwise, you're going to need to do some shuffling of your spear between turns in order to have the shield spell available. If that's an issue, then I actually recommend the Warcaster feat at level 5. I will be recommending Warcaster, but not until much later, because if it's not worth worrying about. Talk to your DM and ask them how they will handle it. Personally, I'm a rule stickler for somatic components, so at my table you would want to pick up Warcaster for sure. But my impression, communicating with commenters on my videos, is that I'm in the minority on this one. The mechanics for juggling components of spells are not popular, they're confusing, and it seems from my perspective at least, there is a better than average chance you won't need to worry. So for this build, that will be my assumption. But again, if we are playing as a stickler by the rules, you want to get Warcaster after shield as soon as possible. But assuming we can get it, then that's a 23 armor class available to us, at least once per short rest. Once we get Shield of Faith on there, then it would be 25. Once we get Plate Armor, that'd be 27. At level 3, we go back to Paladin, and now we are going to stick with Paladin. I think for any Hexblade, you want to stick with Paladin for a minimum of Paladin level 6. But I think there is a good case to go straight Paladin for the rest of your career, so that's what I'm going to do here to show you the advantages of doing that. Obviously, lots of people after 6 levels of Paladin are going to be starting to look at things like Sorcerer or maybe Bard, and that's good too. But for this build, we're going to show the classic Hexadin, which is Hexblade 1, and then Paladin the rest of the way. At level 2 in Paladin, we get a fighting style, and dueling, I believe, is the most optimal choice. A +2 damage on a d6 weapon, it's a pretty big deal. And we'll get a +2 on our bonus action attack as well, so that's a +2 on a d4 weapon, which is even a bigger deal. We get Divine Smite, which allows us to expend a spell slot on a hit to deliver 2d8 additional radiant damage on a hit. If the target is a fiend or undead, we will add an additional d8. If we expend a higher level spell slot, then we add an additional d8 per spell slot level up to a 4th level slot. And remember, if we score a critical hit, this all gets doubled. So if we spend a 4th level slot against a fiend on a critical hit, that would be 12d8 damage, 54 radiant damage, on average, 1 hit. Now, if you are wondering, when should I use Divine Smite with a Paladin? I encourage you to look at my last video, which I will link up above, that goes over that very decision. So now our first level spell selection, and I am recommending Bless, Command, Shield of Faith, and Wrathful Smite. Bless is a strong first action in combat. You know the drill. 3 party members get a d4 to add to attack rolls and saving throws for up to the next minute using your concentration. Command gives us a good non-concentration option, and it's a very strong spell. Pick an enemy and they make a saving throw, or they'll skip their next turn except to follow the commands you make, and you can make them approach, run away, fall prone, and then after they follow the command, they end their turn without doing anything else. Shield of Faith gives us a bonus action casting option, so we can do this in concert with our attack action, and then we boost our already pretty good armor class by +2 for a decent 10-minute duration using concentration as well. This can also be cast on an ally if you prefer. Finally, probably the best smite spell, Wrathful Smite. Another bonus action casting, and with your next spear hit, the target makes a saving throw or becomes frightened of you for up to a minute using your concentration. The nice thing here is if they fail their initial saving throw, this is very difficult to shake. They have to use their action, and then they have to succeed on a wisdom ability check, and since they're already frightened, that check has disadvantage. So let's stop at level 3 here and do a quick damage calculation. So now we are using our charisma for our weapon attacks. That's +3 right now for both attacks and damage. We also added +2 for the dueling combat style. So now it's 60% for 8.5, 60% for 7.5. That's our base attack and our bonus action attack. Then the critical damage is 3.5 and 2.5, 5% chance of each of those. And then our opportunity attack, 5.28 divided by 4, assuming once per combat and 4 rounds per combat. That's another 1.32. So our DPR now is sitting at 11.23. And our baseline at this level is 7.65. So we're sitting 47% over baseline. That's really good. It's not going to stay that high, but we see some really nice improvement here as we approach that 5th level. And I should mention that those calculations are without adding any smite attacks at all. With so few spell slots at this level, honestly, I'd be pretty hesitant to smite unless I had the perfect circumstance. Like if you expect that smite to land a finishing blow to an important enemy, then yeah, it's totally worth the slot. So our next 3 levels go to Paladin. Let's just do them all at once here. First, our Sacred Oath. Now, we have to talk about our level progression here. If you are planning to take 6 levels in Paladin total, then switch back to Warlock, or maybe grab some Sorcerer or Bard, then really anything goes. However, for this build, we're doing the classic Hexadin, so 1 Warlock, then 19 Paladin, and in that case, I think Watcher's Paladin is the most optimal choice. With 0 bonus to Dexterity, that initiative boost at level 7, really going to help us. And it helps any allies that are within our aura as well. With Watchers at level 3, we get Watcher's Will and Abjure the Extraplanar as our Channel Divinity options. Watcher's Will is a strong defensive buff. You choose a number of creatures up to your Charisma modifier, and you use your action on them to give them advantage on all their mental saving throws for 1 minute. This is something you do when you determine that in the current combat, 1 or more of those saving throws is going to come up a lot, like you're fighting Mind Flayers or something like that. Abjure the Extraplanar works like Turn Undead for clerics, but it works on aberrations, celestials, elementals, fae, and fiends. We also get another way to spend our Channel Divinity, and that's Harness Divine Power. This is a bonus action, and we expend a Channel Divinity and restore an expended spell slot. Spell slot level can be no higher than half our proficiency bonus, rounded up. Third level also gives us immunity to disease. This doesn't come up a lot in the game, really, to be honest. We're going to get Oath spells through Watcher's Paladin. These are automatically prepared spells that don't take any of our spell preparations. Third level isn't giving us much, really. Fifth level, we get Moonbeam, which is okay. Ninth level, we get Counterspell. That's kind of the premier spell on this list. Banishment on 13th is okay. Other than that, this is mostly circumstantial stuff. Then at 4th level, we get an ability score improvement. And here's where 17 Charisma comes in, as we can take a half feat. Fey Touched is the feat we want, and we want it for Misty Step. We can cast it once for free, and again with second level slots. This is a big gain on a Paladin, as except for certain subclasses, for which Watchers is not, teleportation options aren't really there for the Paladin. This ends up filling a major weakness. As for the first level spell options, if Silvery Barbs is available in your game, take that. If Gift of Alacrity is available in your game, that's the second option. If neither is available, I'd say Bane is a reasonable choice. Weakens the saving throws and attack rolls of up to 3 creatures using your concentration. And if you're a weapon user, which we are, extra attack is huge, of course, which we get with our 5th level in Paladin, level 6 overall. I recommend preparing 2 additional second level spells. Let's take a look at those. First, we're going to take Fine Steed. If mounts are going to work in your current environment, Fine Steed is fantastic. Just a massive improvement to your base maneuverability. A mount summoned with a spell will gain the benefit of a spell you can cast that targets only you as long as you're mounted. So yes, that includes Misty Step. Now, if you haven't gotten a magic weapon yet in your game, I think magic weapon is probably the way to go here. Otherwise, assuming we're going to have a magic weapon at this level, which I can't predict for you, but for purposes of this build, we'll assume you've got, then I'm recommending Aid. This is going to increase the maximum hit points and the current hit points of 3 allies and has great upcasting. So let's do another check on our DPR. We have a few changes. Our Charisma is now 18, so that's plus 4. Plus we have extra attack. And at this point, I would at least strongly consider a Smite if we score a critical hit. I mean with a first level slot anyways, so I've included that in the calculations. So we've got our extra attack now, so we've got 2 60% times 9.5, then the 60% times 8.5, that's a bonus action attack. Then we've got a critical damage there, then our opportunity attack. It leaves us at 19.95, and our baseline at this level would be 16.5. So that is 21% over the baseline. So we're still doing reasonably well. So we're going to be going back to Paladin the whole way here. But let's stop for a damage check at a level 11 in Paladin and another damage check at the end. So at level 6, the premier ability of the Paladin class. If you're playing a Paladin, this is probably a big part of the reason for that. You don't just add your Charisma bonus to every saving throw, but you also provide that benefit to any ally within 10 feet. Now, what I find is, this isn't your Charisma bonus to all your allies' saves most of the time. It's actually pretty rare in combat that all the party stays within 10 feet of the Paladin, but I would assume you're providing this to at least one other party member most of the time. Regardless, it is a huge benefit. The level 7 feature is Aura of the Sentinel, which is probably the best 7th level feature of any Paladin subclass. We can now provide an initiative boost to ourselves and allies within 10 feet as well. This is going to be plus 3 right now, but it's going to scale, eventually becoming plus 6. At 8th level in Paladin, we get our Charisma up to 20. Here's where we see the Hexadin really have a huge advantage over the Paladin, because we're not just boosting our saving throw bonus and our spell casting, but our weapon attacks as well. Normally Paladins have that hard choice, but for us, it's all together. And at 10th level in Paladin, our aura also includes immunity to the Frightened Condition. This is really good. Frightened Condition is a really bad thing. It comes up reasonably often in the game. And just a passive immunity that you have all the time that you can also spread to allies near you, that's just really good. And at 11th level, Improved Divine Smite adds a d8 radiant damage every time we hit with our spear. This includes our bonus action attacks. This includes our opportunity attacks. Assuming we're attacking 3 times on our turn, that's potentially 3d8 extra damage on each turn that we're getting. And this is one of the reasons to consider going straight Paladin levels instead of multiclassing into Sorcerer or Bard, because we're getting this passive addition to our damage. With those classes, there's a little more finesse to get those damage boosts. We are now up to 3rd level spells, and Aura Vitality is a fantastic healing spell. Heals about 70 hit points of damage with a 3rd level slot, and you can spread it around. I normally don't cast this in combat, but there's probably cases where it's a decent choice, but outside of combat, great way to heal a whole bunch of hit points. We have Counterspell automatically prepared, and Paladins normally don't get access to this spell, so it's a nice addition. I recommend preparing Revivify, good spell to have, just for that worst case scenario. Honestly, although it's the lowest level resurrection option, it's also probably the best, since it requires the cheapest material component and it doesn't impose the harsh penalties that the other resurrection options normally do. The biggest disadvantage of this spell is actually that you're going to need to have it prepared. Well, something like Raise Dead or Resurrection, you could prepare the next day. Revivify has a 1-minute limit on how long the creature can be dead, so it has to be cast right away. Finally, Spirit Shroud. Bonus action casting, so we can still take our attack action. We added D8 damage to our weapon damage, and that stacks with improved Divine Smite. We have 3 damage type options. Normally, I would take Radiant here, but having the option to select Necrotic or Cold, it's nice to have. But there's 2 additional reasons that we want this. First, any creature we hit with an attack can't regain hit points, so it's useful against creatures that can heal or regenerate. And second, every enemy within 10 feet of us gets a speed reduction of 10 feet. When you're tanking, this is a good tanking feature. Reducing the speed of enemies without a saving throw, pretty good way to help keep them away from other party members, and this is just an add-on on the spell. You don't need to hit them with an attack or anything. If they're near you, they get the penalty. Finally, I would go back to 2nd level spells and select Locate Object. This just tends to be a really useful utility spell. It's really one of the best divinations in the game. So let's see how our damage is holding up at level 12. We're adding a d8 to every weapon attack, and now we have a 20 charisma, and we're maybe using 1 Spirit Shroud per day. So 60% of 15 twice, 60% for 14 once, that's a bonus action attack. Then the next 3 are added for criticals. I'm assuming that if we crit, we're going to add a 1st level smite. And then I've got 1 opportunity attack per combat, and the 60% times the 14.18 divided by 16, that's the addition for Spirit Shroud. DPR total is 31.91, baseline 27.15, we're 18% over. I mean, if you want it to be a little bit higher, easy enough to do. First off, use a Hexblade Curse. I haven't included that in the calculations, as I mentioned. And secondly, add more smites. Lots of ways we can get it higher than 18% if that's our focus. So at 12th level in Paladin, I'd pick up Warcaster. If you needed it for the shield spell, you wanted to take this earlier, and then this might be the level where you get your 20 charisma. Now we can replace opportunity attacks with spells that target an enemy. Even a spell like Command can be great here. I would say our big spell possibility here would be Banishment. And then advantage on concentration saves from taking damage, big as well. At 14th level, we can use an action to end a spell on ourselves or an ally we can touch. With 5 uses per long rest, you shouldn't run out of these. 15th level gives us a reaction option when a creature we can see within 30 feet succeeds on a mental saving throw, which we might not only be providing +5 to, but maybe advantage as well. We can deal 2d8 plus 5 force damage to the creature that forced the saving throw. At 16th level, we're going to get the Inspiring Leader feat. This is going to allow us to provide 22 temporary hit points with 10 minutes of inspiring them once per short or long rest. So we should be providing this multiple times per day. Now, at 18th level in Paladin, we don't see this very often, but if I'm asked about the advantages of going straight Paladin instead of going into Sorcerer or into Bard, if you're going to get to 18th level, this is a big reason why you might want to go Paladin, because our auras increase to 30 feet. This is a huge benefit. At this point, it's really conceivable that we're providing our benefits, which include +6 initiative bonus and +5 to all saving throws and immunity to fear, to all our allies pretty much all the time. At our final level, we'll increase our constitution to improve our hit points and our constitution saving throws. If you want to focus on just the hit points, tough is a reasonable option as a feat. We'll grab the Find Greater Steed as a 4th level spell. Now we can summon a Pegasus as our flying mount. It has a lot more base hit points than a Warhorse, and we can boost it with Inspiring Leader for 25 more. And a fantastic flying speed. Death Ward is a useful spell, allows you to drop to 1 hit point when we would normally drop to 0. Make sure to cast this on yourself, and do it well mounted on your Pegasus, and then you're going to share the effect. We grab Holy Weapon. This is an additional 2d8 damage with our spear for an hour. This may very well last us to our next short rest. In fact, it's entirely possible you could have Holy Weapon up all the time if that's what you wanted to do. And Circle of Power, give yourself and all your allies advantage on all saving throws against spells and magical effects, as well as reducing the damage of damaging spells and effects. And yes, this works against all the new magical innate stuff that monsters got in Monsters of the Multiverse. Let's do a final damage calculation. For these calculations, I'm going to assume we're going to use Holy Weapon. I'm also going to assume we're going to get a Vigilant Rebuke action, an average of maybe once per combat. Honestly, for that one, it's probably not that spread out, like it might be 4 times in one combat and then 0 in the next few. But here's how it shakes down. So 60% of 24 damage on each hit with a spear, and that's twice, and then with the butt end of the spear once. Then our critical hit damage, again, I'm only assuming a first level smite on a critical hit. Then 15.7 divided by 4, that's our opportunity attack. And then 14 divided by 4, that's the Vigilant Rebuke. And our DPR ends up being 52.58. Baseline is 35.4. So we're about 49% over baseline. That's as good as we've ever been. Now it'll be less if we're not always using Holy Weapon, of course. But either way, you should be able to exceed baseline super easy. With these calculations, I'm assuming about 5 first level spell smites per day, which you can do thanks to your pack slot, but by this level you could afford higher level slots than that, so we could actually get higher than 49% over baseline if we expend the resources to do so. And that is my basic guide to making a Hexadin. So until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.